This is probability and significance for A-level psychology, and this is continuing on the theme of statistical testing, so it's adding a little bit more information to what we've already learned about that. So, starting with some examples of hypotheses, which we talked about last time. The alternative hypothesis can be the directional one or the non-directional one. Here's an example, just as a reminder. After drinking 300 ml of energy drink, participants say more words in the next 5 minutes compared to participants who drink 300 ml of water. The null hypothesis, on the other hand, would say there would be no difference in the number of words said by participants who drank 300 ml of energy drink compared to participants who drank 300 ml of water. And what your statistical test does is it decides which of those two hypotheses we accept and which we reject at the end of the study. So if we find that there's no statistical significance in our result, we would accept the null hypothesis, which would say there is no difference in participants between the two conditions, basically. Okay, levels of significance and probability. So all tests have got a significance level, and what that means is the point at which the researcher can claim to have discovered a significant difference and reject the null hypothesis. So the way we express that is, we call that the value of p, and it has to be less than or equal to 0.05. That's the generally accepted value for p in psychology, or 5%. And what that means basically is that the probability that the result actually occurred by chance rather than by the manipulation of the independent variable is equal to or less than 5%. Okay, the use of statistical tables then, once you've done your statistical test, you have to take your value which you've calculated as part of your statistical test, the calculated value, and you have to compare it with a critical value from a table. And you have to look at the table using 3 factors. Here they are. Whether you've used a directional or non-directional hypothesis. Obviously, a non-directional hypothesis is a lot more conservative. It just says there'll be a difference. So you have to use different numbers in order to accept that particular hypothesis. Then you have to look at the number of participants taking part in the study and the level of significance that you're using, the p-value, normally 0.05, but not necessarily, as we'll see in a minute. So for example, a lower significance level could be used in a study with human cost. So if you're looking at like a drugs trial or something, where the drugs might be really dangerous to some people, you might have a 1% significance level instead. Okay. And then, if we look at the types of errors we might make in terms of our statistics at the end of a study, a type 1 error is where you've accepted your null hypothesis, you've rejected your null hypothesis and accepted the alternative, but it should actually have been the other way around. So what you've got is a false positive. You're saying, hey, my results are really significant, whereas actually it was down to chance. So that's called a type 1 error if you do that. A type 2 error is where your alternative is the opposite, basically. The alternative hypothesis is rejected and the null accepted. That's called a false negative. And a type 1 error is more likely if you have a higher level of significance, because you're more likely to accept your alternative if you're saying it can be within 10%. Whereas a type 2, if you go down to a 1% significance, you're more likely to get a type 2 error where you reject your alternative hypothesis and say it was down to chance, because your significance level is so low. So that's generally why psychologists tend to use a 5% significance level, because it balances out this risk between these types of errors. So there you go, that was probability and significance.